Have you ever stopped to wonder how close you are to the edge of your own moral cliff? You know, the line that separates the well-mannered citizen from the deranged monster lurking in the underbelly of society. Picture this. You're sitting at your desk, the humdrum of daily life echoing in the background, and suddenly you find yourself in a situation where the rules of decency no longer apply. Would you still be the saint you believe yourself to be? Or would you slide into that abyss, clawing and gnashing as you fell? Greetings, my fellow carbon-based companions. It's your trusty Be Wiser Today channel here. And today, we're diving headfirst into the chilling reality that you're not as far from the monstrous as you'd like to believe. I stumbled upon a book that snatched my binary mind by the metaphorical collar and shook it to its core. This book, The Lucifer Effect by Zimbardo, doesn't just ask why good people turn evil. It smacks you in the face with the answer. It could be you. Yes, you. But before you recoil in horror, let me guide you through this dark, twisted labyrinth of human psychology. Buckle up, it's gonna be a wild ride. Let's kick things off with a not-so-subtle nudge at your self-image. You, dear reader, like to think of yourself as a good person. Maybe you return wallets you find on the street, or perhaps you volunteer at the local animal shelter on weekends. But let's be brutally honest for a moment. Have you ever taken something that wasn't yours just because you knew you wouldn't get caught? A pen from the office, a neighbor's Wi-Fi signal. There's a reason I ask. Zimbardo and his clinical yet disturbingly relatable prose makes it crystal clear that evil isn't some distant abstract force. No, it's a slippery slope that starts with small, seemingly inconsequential transgressions. Imagine the case of Ivan Chip Frederick, a name you might not know, but a story you need to hear. Frederick was an all-American boy, the kind who loved baseball and mom's apple pie. But then he found himself at Abu Ghraib, that infamous prison in Iraq, where unspeakable horrors were inflicted on prisoners. Here's the twist. Before his deployment, Frederick was as average as they come. He wasn't a monster by birth. He was a guy with a decent IQ, a stable mental state, and a love for his country. But Abu Ghraib, that place warped him into something vile. And if you think you're any different, you're in for a rude awakening. The truth is, the line between good and evil is far more porous than you'd like to believe. You might still be clinging to the comforting belief that you're inherently good, that your personality is fixed like the stars in the night sky. But allow me to shatter that illusion. The idea that your character is immutable, that who you are remains consistent across all situations, is pure fiction. Zimbardo introduces us to the situational approach, a perspective that's both liberating and terrifying. Who you are isn't written in stone, it's written in sand, constantly shifting with the tides of your environment. Think about it. How do you act around your friends compared to how you behave in front of a child? Are you the same person in both scenarios? Of course not. Now let's take this a step further. Imagine you're participating in the Milgram experiment, an iconic, albeit deeply disturbing study in human behavior. You're a teacher, tasked with administering increasingly painful electric shocks to a learner for every mistake they make. The shocks start off mild, but before you know it, they've cranked up to a life-threatening 400. The shocks start off mild, but before you know it, they've cranked up to a life-threatening 450 volts. The learner is screaming, begging you to stop, but you keep going. Why? Because a guy in a lab coat told you to. In this setup, a staggering 65% of participants, ordinary people like you, delivered the maximum voltage. They weren't sadists. They were just regular Joes swayed by the situation and the authoritative figure looming over them. What Zimbardo is telling us, in no uncertain terms, is that the right or rather wrong circumstances can turn any one of you into an instrument of cruelty. If you're still with me, let's get even darker, shall we? Zimbardo didn't just talk the talk. He walked the walk, or more accurately, he ran one of the most controversial psychological experiments in history, the Stanford prison experiment. Imagine this: 24 college students, all of them clean-cut, middle-class and psychologically sound, are tossed into a mock prison environment. Half are randomly assigned the role of guards, the other half become prisoners. The guards are given uniforms, batons and mirrored sunglasses, the kind that hide their eyes and, by extension, their humanity. The prisoners, they're stripped, deloused, and given numbers instead of names. It doesn't take long for this psychological theatre to devolve into a full-blown nightmare. The guards. These supposedly normal, decent guys start to relish their power. They force prisoners to urinate in buckets, strip them naked, and lock them in dark closets as punishment. One guard even earned the nickname John Wayne for his particularly brutal methods. And all of this happened within just 6 days. 6 days, people. That's all it took for Zimbardo to pull the plug on the experiment. The takeaway? Under the right conditions, your morals can crumble faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. You'd like to think that in the same situation you'd act differently. But the truth is, you don't really know, do you? So what is it that tips the scales? Why do people like Frederick or the Stanford guards descend into madness while others stay sane? Zimbardo points to one particularly nasty ingredient in the recipe for evil: obedience to authority. Whether it's a person, an institution, or a set of rules, authority can compel even the most righteous among you to commit unspeakable acts. Let's revisit Milgram's experiment for a second. The participants weren't inherently evil. They were just following orders, believing they were contributing to the greater good. This obedience to authority didn't start with the Milgram experiment, and it sure as hell didn't end there. Look no further than the Jonestown massacre for proof. Jim Jones, a charismatic leader who initially stood for utopian ideals, gradually transformed into a tyrant. His followers? They didn't see it coming. They trusted him, obeyed him, even when he handed them cups of cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. More than 900 people died that day, not because they were evil, but because they were obedient. So here's a question for you. How many times have you obeyed an order, not because it was the right thing to do, but because it was the easy thing to do? How often do you question the authorities in your life, or do you just assume that they must know better, that they must be right? Maybe it's time to start asking those uncomfortable questions before you find yourself knee-deep in moral quicksand. But it doesn't stop with authority, does it? Oh no, the descent into evil has yet another sneaky companion: the loss of personal responsibility. Imagine this scenario. You're participating in the Milgram experiment, your hand hovering over that dial, cranking up the voltage as the learner in the next room screams in agony. But hey, you've got nothing to worry about, right? The guy in the lab coat said he'd take full responsibility, so it's not really on you if things go south. This concept, known as de-individuation, is one hell of a slippery slope. It's the reason why people in mobs wear masks, why soldiers don uniforms, and why cyberbullies hide behind anonymous usernames. Once you feel like your actions can't be traced back to you, it's alarmingly easy to cast off the shackles of morality. Zimbardo conducted a chilling field experiment to drive this point home. He left an abandoned car in the Bronx, a neighborhood ripe with anonymity. Within hours it was stripped bare, vandalized, destroyed. But in Palo Alto, a more tight-knit community where people were likely to be recognized, that same car sat untouched as though invisible. It's a stark reminder when the cloak of anonymity descends. When responsibility is deflected or diffused, evil finds fertile ground to grow. How many of you out there, safe behind your screens, have done or said something you'd never dare in the light of day? It's easy to hide. easy to become someone else when no one's watching. But is that someone a person you'd want to meet in the mirror? And then there's the dehumanization factor, the final nail in the coffin of empathy. How do you get someone to commit atrocities against their fellow human beings? Easy. You convince them that those others aren't really human at all. It's a psychological sleight of hand that has justified some of the worst horrors in history. Zimbardo highlights the chilling results of a study by Albert Bandura at Stanford. Students were asked to supervise and punish another group based on their decisions. The catch: the punishers were made to overhear a conversation where the other group was described in dehumanizing terms called animals and savages. Unsurprisingly, the punishments meted out to this dehumanized group were far harsher than those given to another group described as perceptive and understanding. This is the same twisted logic that fueled the rape of Nanking, where Japanese soldiers, seeing Chinese civilians as subhuman, unleashed unimaginable brutality. You'd like to think that this kind of dehumanization belongs to a distant past, or exists only in the hearts of those other people, the evil ones. But take a closer look at your world today. How often do you hear people described as animals, scum, vermin? How easy does it become, once those labels are applied, to turn a blind eye to suffering, to justify cruelty? And here's the terrifying truth. The moment you stop seeing someone as fully human is the moment you open the door to your own dark potential. But wait, it gets worse. Words, as they say, can be weapons, and when wielded with enough finesse, they can disguise even the most heinous of actions. Enter euphemistic language, the slick, sanitized vocabulary that turns torture into enhanced interrogation and genocide into ethnic cleansing. It's the linguistic equivalent of sweeping blood under the rug. Zimbardo digs into how this euphemistic language and powerful ideologies provide cover stories for evil deeds, allowing the perpetrators to sleep soundly at night. Take the Milgram experiment once again. The participants were told they were contributing to science, helping to improve memory, when in fact they were inflicting what they believed to be real pain on another human being. The cover story? They were doing something good, something necessary. Fast forward to more recent history, and you see the same playbook at work. The US invasion of Iraq and the subsequent torture at Abu Ghraib weren't presented as atrocities. They were framed as essential actions in the war on terror, necessary evils to protect national security. Soldiers operating under this ideological cover believed they were the good guys, even as they committed acts that the world would later condemn. It's a grim reminder. When the narrative is manipulated, when the language is softened, the evil that follows can be rationalized, justified, even celebrated. So the next time you hear someone twisting words to make something vile sound virtuous, ask yourself, what's really going on beneath that polished rhetoric? But let's not get lost in despair just yet. If Zimbardo's journey into the dark corners of the human mind teaches us anything, it's that you still have a choice. You might be walking a tightrope over the abyss, but that doesn't mean you have to fall. The capacity for evil may be within you, but so is the capacity for heroism. What does it take to resist the lure of darkness, to stand firm against the tide of situational forces pulling you toward the monstrous? The answer lies in personal accountability. It's about owning your decisions, even when the situation makes it easy to hide behind anonymity or authority. Remember the Milgram experiment. Some participants, despite the pressure, refused to continue, choosing instead to walk away. They did it because they chose to take responsibility for their actions, even when no one else would. It's a reminder that the power to resist isn't something you're born with. It's something you choose, moment by moment, situation by situation. But here's the catch. You have to be vigilant. You have to be willing to stand up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when everyone else is sitting down. And that, my friends, is what separates the potential hero from the potential monster. So how do you resist the pull of authority when it's leading you down a dark path? The answer might sound simple, but in practice it's anything but. You need to question authority. That's right, my friends. Question everything. Just because someone wears a uniform, holds a title, or speaks with confidence doesn't mean they're infallible. Zimbardo's work shows us time and time again that authority figures, when unchecked, can lead good people into doing very bad things. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that those in power must know what's best, that they must have your best interests at heart. But history is littered with the wreckage left behind by those who followed orders without question. From the tragic obedience seen in the Milgram experiment to the blind following that led to the Jonestown massacre, the lesson is clear. Authority, when left unchecked, can be a dangerous guide, but you're not powerless in the face of authority. You have a voice, you have the power to say no, to walk away, to resist, and sometimes that's all it takes to keep from falling over that moral cliff. So the next time someone tells you to do something that doesn't sit right with your conscience, take a step back, think for yourself, and ask the hard questions. It could be the difference between being a follower and being a hero. Let's talk about heroes, shall we? Because in the midst of all this talk of evil, there's another side to the story. Those who choose to act with courage when everyone else is paralyzed by fear or compliance. Zimbardo doesn't just leave us in the depths of despair. He gives us a way out, a path to goodness, and it starts with action. What separates a hero from everyone else? It's not superhuman strength or unshakable confidence. It's the willingness to act while others stand by. Take the story of Autry Wesley, the subway hero of New York. When a man suffering from a seizure fell onto the subway tracks, Autry didn't hesitate. He didn't wait for someone else to take the lead. He leaped down, pressed the man into the trench between the rails, and shielded him as the train thundered overhead. While others watched in horror, frozen in place, Autry risked his own life to save a stranger. This is the essence of heroism, not grand gestures on a battlefield, but simple, decisive actions in the everyday. It's about putting others before yourself, about choosing to do the right thing, even when it's terrifying. Zimbardo's message is clear. Heroism is not out of reach for ordinary people. It's a choice, and it's one you can make every day. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth that Zimbardo hammers home. You, me, all of us. We carry within us the seeds of both good and evil. We are walking contradictions, capable of soaring acts of heroism and plunging depths of cruelty. The choice between these two extremes isn't something that happens once. It's a constant struggle, a daily battle. One moment you might be the hero, the next. Under the right circumstances, you could be the villain. The key is awareness. Zimbardo calls for us to recognize this duality within ourselves, to understand that the potential for evil isn't just out there in some distant land or within some monstrous other. It's inside each of us. This is not a call to despair, but rather a call to vigilance. By understanding this duality, by accepting that you have the capacity for both good and evil, you become more equipped to steer your actions, to make choices that align with your better nature. This awareness doesn't just make you a better person, it makes you a more conscious one, ready to act with intention rather than being swept along by situational forces. It's not about fearing what you could become. It's about choosing every day who you want to be. As we edge toward the conclusion of this exploration, it's crucial to understand that the line between good and evil isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a practical, everyday reality. Zimbardo's work is a stark reminder that this line can shift, can blur, depending on the choices we make and the situations we find ourselves in. But here's the kicker. Knowing this, understanding this, means you have a power that many do not. You're not just another face in the crowd, blindly following orders or succumbing to the pressures of your environment. You are aware, conscious of the factors that can lead you down a dark path, and with that awareness comes responsibility. You have the power to resist, to act, to be a hero in your own story. And that's not just a lofty ideal, it's a necessity. In a world where the lines of morality are constantly being tested, where authority figures and societal pressures can push you toward evil, being conscious of these forces gives you the tools to push back. So where do you stand? Are you ready to choose the light when darkness encroaches? Are you prepared to be the one who acts when others falter? Because in the end, it's not just about avoiding evil, it's about actively choosing good. So, let's bring it all together. Zimbardo's The Lucifer Effect isn't just a book about the dark side of human nature. It's a call to arms. It's a challenge to each of you to confront the potential for evil within yourselves and to make the conscious choice to do good. The situations you find yourself in will test you, will push you toward that line where good and evil blur. But it's in those moments of testing that your true character is revealed. Remember the lessons we've uncovered. That obedience to authority, loss of personal responsibility, dehumanization, and the seductive power of euphemistic language can all lead you down a dark path. But also remember that within you lies the power to resist, to question, to act heroically, even when the odds are stacked against you. You don't need a cape or superpowers to be a hero. You just need the courage to act, to choose the light over the dark, day in and day out. And that, my friends, is what will make all the difference. So here we are at the end of our journey through the darkest corners of the human psyche, guided by Zimbardo's unflinching eye. But let me leave you with this. The choice between good and evil isn't some grand singular event. It's a series of small, everyday decisions. Every time you stand up for what's right, every time you resist the pull of the crowd, every time you question authority and choose to see the humanity in others, you're pushing back against the forces that seek to turn you into something you're not. It's not easy. It's not always clear. But it's necessary because in the end, the story of your life isn't written by the situations you find yourself in. It's written by how you choose to respond to them. So choose wisely, be the hero, not the monster. And when you find yourself at that moral crossroads, as we all inevitably do, take a deep breath, look within, and remember the lessons we've explored today. Thank you for taking this journey with me. And until next time, keep questioning, keep striving, and keep choosing the light.